It was February 10th, 2003. A legend passed away. And now 8 years later, we're going to sit with a friend of his to talk about the life and times of Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, right here on the premiere episode of the Rose Pro Wrestling Report. Rose Pro Wrestling Report. I'm right here with Fidel Sierra, the Cuban Assassin, and Fantasy, also known as your shoot name, which is Paula, of course. And I'm Shannon Rose. February 10th, 2003 is the fateful day when you actually found him dead. Let's talk a little about leading up to that day and that day itself.
Yeah, we actually picked him up in Tampa the day before the show at the fairgrounds, and we checked in at the hotel. He took us out to dinner, and we were just, having a good time, having a nice meal, having a few drinks, and the two of them were talking.
And the one thing, remember, the one thing he kept saying, brother, I've had the hiccups for like 2 weeks straight, and I can't get rid of them. They keep coming and going. And
while we were at dinner, he actually got the hiccups, and he could not get rid of the
They had to make some drink. What was I forget? It was some drink, and it helped them get rid of the hiccups. And he talked about a lot of stuff that night. Yeah. Confined with us and a lot of stuff. Some stuff that was bothering him, but
there was no indication.
But
otherwise,
there was no indication of why. I mean, it was business stuff that we talked about that was bothering him.
He looked better than he had in a long time. He was being Curt. A few other guys showed up. We ended up going back to the room, and because the next day was a big show, Curt ended up around 9:15. He said, look, I'm tired, and we'll go out and have a good time the next night. Let's call it an early night. So we left. We were in the room next door, and the next morning we had said that, okay, we're going to
go pick up Conan at the airport, and so I said to Paul, Paul, I need to call Curt to see if he's going to, to know that if he wants to grab something to eat, we have to grab it before we get Conan, or, we can't go sit down to eat because we get Conan to be at the fairground a certain time. And I kept calling him, and there was no answer.
And it was just unlike Curt, because he was ultimate professional.
Yeah.
And so we finally called maintenance. Some of the other guys showed up. We kept knocking on the door. They unlocked the door, but the latch was there.
The maid came, and they unlocked the latch. And
bottom line is he was gone, and he'd been gone for probably a couple hours, and it was just one thing that's branded in my mind and will stay there forever. And I know it's got to be 10 times worse for his family, because that's one thing I want to get out there, is that he loved his family
more than anything. And always. And for me, I lost a brother, a best friend. That was his wingman, everything in the book. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think of Curt Hennig. We don't mention him somehow. And God bless. I love you, brother. I know you're up there. And
a lot of good company.
And a lot of good company with a lot of our other fallen brothers. I know you and Rick Rude, all of them are right now probably having some matches up there in heaven.
Well, maybe guarding some Jack and,
And one thing about Curt is what was so important to him is his son. And his son, we saw one of the first instances of his son was during the WWE Hall of Fame when he inducted his dad into the Hall of Fame. And a lot of people talked about what a great talker his son was, and it was so important, I think, and we talked a little about this before, his son too, maybe having a great career, but also what about, do you think today with his son being part of the new Nexus that he would be happy with his son's career?
Well, Paul and I, Curt would share so much stuff with us that he wouldn't share with nobody else. And one of the things was, and this is like way before he passed away, God bless. He was talking about, said, my son Joe, he wants to get into the wrestling, and I'm thinking about, I really want to start training him, helping him get into it, but I want to keep him away from some of the crazy stuff that goes on in the wrestling business. And but he said, but I really think he would be great at it. And I said, you know what, Curt? I said, I agree with you. You know what I mean? Look at you. You're second generation. You're great. And I think Joe Hennig, which is McGillicuddy or however.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they actually gave him a name that, it's almost gimmick when the people know Mr. Perfect
Yes,
Curt Hennig
and
so much, even to this generation, remember.
Right.
Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig.
I think bottom line, Curt would be very, very proud of his son.
But he's coming into his own too. I think that's what WWE wants.
And you just got to remember, he's just at the beginning of his career.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be
within a year, less than a year.
He would be very proud of how far he's come. And we were just watching the show the other day, and Dave goes, oh my God, did you just see that drop kick? That was gorgeous.
Oh, I mean, it ran, ran all. I mean,
well, let me ask you this, guys.
Drop kick. He threw this drop kick, Shannon, and it was just like the drop kick that he threw at me. I don't know how many years ago at the Portland Sports Arena, and it was exactly. I mean, oh my gosh! I told her right away. We were at the bar there, and I said, wow, did you see that drop kick, honey? It was exactly just like Curt's drop kicks. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
And talking about that, you've been friends with him for many years, dating back to Pacific Northwest, AWA, when he was just a kid. Larry the Axe Hennig, his dad, you knew his dad very well. Talk a little about how you, became friends with him and how you got to meet Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig.
Well, Curt Hennig came to the Pacific Northwest to work for Don Owens' promotion, Portland Wrestling. And even when Curt came back then, I knew he was there, and I knew, he went on to AWA, but he left there, came back, and knew he was being groomed to go work for the WWE, which at that time was WWF. But Curt and I traveled up and down the roads then, even though we were feuding with one another, all that, which was unheard of back then. We would ride together. That's how close we were. We would ride together, and he would drop me off a block down from the arena wherever we were wrestling, and I'd put my hood on, and I can remember cutting through people's yards and people looking at me weird and all that, and we would laugh about it. I said, Curt, come on, man, where are you going to drop me off next time? You keep dropping me off further and further. But Curt was a river, you know what I mean? And I knew that, and he could get away with stuff like that. But Curt always referred to me as his wingman, And the first time that I wrestled Curt Hennig there, that it was Curt Hennig's first sellout in Portland wrestling. It was a coal miner's glove match. I can remember it like if it was yesterday. Curt, we did a deal where I hit him with some brass knuckles, and then Dutch Savage gave him the coal miner's glove and brought it out, and because Dutch Savage was the king of the coal miner's glove match, and I remember doing the interview, and I said, Curt, you got me backed against the wall now, and I got no choice but next Saturday night to end your wrestling career. And that's all it took, that little deal back then. And Don Owens said, well, you guys, it should be a pretty good crowd next week, and it turned away like 2,000 people. Wow. And I never will forget that, because Curt was so like, wow, we sold out the Portland Sports Arena, turned away 2,000 people, and it was great,
And you almost became the world champion because of Curt Hennig.
Well, actually, the belt got held up one time with Curt Hennig when he was AWA world champion. He wrestled the grappler, and the belt was held up, and he had a neck injury. And without permission of the Ray Blackburn or whoever was the commissioner for AWA back then, I went and wrestled. Curt Hennig stood in the corner, and I wrestled the grappler won the AWA World title. Curt Hennig came in the ring. I knew I had to give Curt Hennig the AWA World title back. And Curt Hennig, that was one of the times I got to rip him back. I said, why should I give you this? Why should I give you this belt right now, Curt? I'm the world champion. And Curt said, don't mess around. Don't mess around, brother. This ain't the time. Don't be messing around. And then I gave him the title, and and then we laughed about it in the back in the dressing room because I said, I got you back for once.
I always, I didn't know Curt as long as Dave did. And we met for the first time in Puerto Rico when David brought him in to wrestle Carly, and they threw a really big house and had a couple of great matches. But Curt Dave was his wingman, but Curt kind of took me under his wing. He always made sure that I was involved, that I was in the picture. He took care of me, he made sure, and I really appreciated that from someone of his caliber, and we stopped at the store and they'd get out and buy some beers, and he knew I didn't like beer, and he'd always bring me some wine.
Yes,
he'd
sure
always,
was like, wow.
He was, Shannon, today is 8 years since Curt passed away, and it's just hard to remember him, and the day where we found him, and we make it a practice of every anniversary we get a little bottle of Jack Daniels, because everybody that knew Curt knew that one of his deals was to gargle a shot of Jack. So why don't you hold these? And I'd like everybody out there to that has ever known Curt or admired his work, his wrestling ability, to
and all the boys that know,
and
all the boys
that have been down the road with him, grab a shot of Jack. And
this is for you, Curt Hennig. Love you always, my brother.
God bless. And